All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this special meeting of the Washington County Finance and Budget Committee to order. I have asked Chief of Staff Brian Lester to do us the honor of the prayer and pledge this evening. Chief of Staff Lester.
Thank you. Would you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this day. God, we're thankful for this time together to come and do the county's work. God, we lift up those to you who are suffering through this horrible pandemic and this disease. We pray for the families of our military men and women and those civilians still in Afghanistan and then in the country and just the innocent people there as well. God, be with this group of individuals tonight as they debate and discuss and talk about things that matter to all of us. We pray that you would just bless our county, bless our state, bless our country. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Thank you, Chief of Staff Lester. The next item up is the adoption of this evening's agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by J.P. Essery and a second by J.P. Duncan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion is adopted. We have one item on our budget this evening, but it's going to be quite in depth, and that's the review of the county judge's budget. I'd say we just jump right in. What I would like to do is, the judge will present his thoughts. Each individual budget, I've told, let's hit the high points, and if you guys have questions about minutia, we'll definitely entertain those questions. County Judge Wood, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Chairman, for having me here. And first, I want to say thanks for jumping in earlier this year and coming in and visiting with me and talk about your thoughts about the budget process. And obviously, what you guys have done has been yeoman's work, and I appreciate that we're pretty much coming around the corner on some of this. So thank you for doing that. I also want to thank our employees around the county. Again, coming out of where we were last year, even now, it's been a tremendous load on them, but they came through. Obviously, the county's ended far better last year than we originally thought and planned, and we kicked into this year with a pretty good reserve. And again, obviously, we got a lot going forward, and so again, hats off to our employees and to our senior leaders who continue to do yeoman's work. As we walk through the budgets, we'll find that probably 12 or 13 out of the 15 departments that I have, for the most part, came in relatively flat to last year's budget. I think I did mention last year that we would be looking at all the county elected officials to start looking at personnel expansion or increases in some cases based on the population growth and some of the needs of services around the county, as well as capital expenses that will be coming. We can't continue to just maintain our existing infrastructure without doing some work and adding some dollars to maintain and develop and make sure that we're ready for the future when it comes to our buildings and those types of infrastructures around the county with 40 plus buildings that we have. So anyway, having said that, the pleasure is yours, Chairman. We have about 15 departments that we'll cover. I will ask my Chief of Staff to come and walk through those. And if it's walking through even those that are flat, we can do that. If those are 0.5% and more of an increase from last year, we can do that. So your call.
I think I'd like to walk through them, give the justices an opportunity to ask on each one, and that doesn't mean that we necessarily have questions on each one. So.
Sure. You want to bring the chair up, or you want to?
I show the first one we'd like to walk through is Animal Shelter, page 108.
Take a good seat.
Okay. Well, got some notes and stuff, so hopefully can answer all of your questions. We'll start here with animals. So if you look at the animal shelter, the budget, Shannon and I were talking, and Angela today, Director Ledger Wood, I believe there was an error in that was submitted to you. In what you were given, there looked like there was an increase in line item 1002 from $29,016 to $63,062. I believe that was erroneously added, given something we're asking in personnel, so that should still be the 29,016. And just to let you know, in doing that, her budget request without including personnel changes, her budget was only increased by $5,383.32. And so that's at the animal shelter. What Director Ledgerwood has asked for as far as a change for the court to consider is, right now she has 2 administrative assistants, and they're both part-time. She has 1 administrative assistant that works during the week, constantly, regularly works 64 hours a pay period, or 32 hours a week. She has 1 part-time that works 8 hours a week. The reason for that is our animal shelter still does adoptions and still participates in county or countywide events, adoption events, trying to get some of our animals adopted out on Saturdays. As you know, that's a big time for people to adopt animals because, you know, the shelter closes at 4:30 like the rest of the county does, 4:35, and that's hard for people to get to. So one thing she's asking for is she would like to make the 1 assistant part-timer that works 32 hours, she would like to go ahead and ask for that to be made a full-time position. She would still have her assistant part-time person that would still work the Saturdays, but this would give her, this position would be there Monday through Friday to work every day through the week, and then we'd still have the part-time. In doing that, the total impact to her budget, it would be $10,944 because this because of the hours worked by this part-timer, this person already qualifies for APRS and Social Security and stuff like that. So it's not as heavy of a lift as it would be if we took a part-timer that was working 16 hours a pay period and moved them up. The other request that she has made is she's asking for 2 part-time kennel assistants to replace the jail labor. As many of you are probably aware, when COVID hit, the inmates, the situation with the inmates helping out at the animal shelter and other places ended. And she really, Director Ledgerwood really liked the use of the 309s and the women at the Women's Correctional Facility, our old jail, because they do a wonderful job. They get job training, they get some certification. It's just a good program all around. Because of COVID, that has all stopped. She has not had the use of any inmates, and they did a lot, and we used them a lot. And so what she is asking for you to consider are 2 part-time kennel assistant positions that will just, I mean, her intent is as soon as the inmate labor comes back, we would get rid of these jobs. This would not be there would be no need to have it once we have the inmate labor back, and whoever she hired would know that this was a part-time, could be a very limited amount of time that they'd be working for us. But it has hit them pretty hard. That was a lot of good labor that they had, a lot more than 2, but she thinks 2 will get her by in the meantime. So that's her ask. The total implication to her budget would be an increase of $52,810 if both of those changes were made. And I'll open it up for any questions anyone might have about that budget.
Discussion by the court. JP Usry, are you?
Thank you very much. It's just a strange question that I know it's going through there, but for some reason, the electricity has gone up and the gas and the water went down. And that just seems strange to me. It's not a really big amount of money, but I'm just curious as to why the electricity went up and the water went down and the gas went down.
That's a good question. I don't know, but I will certainly ask and see. I don't know if that was something else that maybe she got off on her line items when submitting it, or if there was a reason. But I will. That's just something I'll have to check in on and see and let you know.
The second question is more of a general question. Some of the departments added for the increased insurance, and some of them did not. And so it makes it a little difficult whenever their budgets are off from the increase in insurance, and yet other departments did not figure any increase in insurance because that is an unknown. I hope that makes sense.
Well, it does, and that you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of look at the trend over the years, but we know that in this next coming cycle, as it stands now, the trends over the years are kind of going to be out the window because of the increase that we're going to see. We are working to look to possibly see if we can't do something else that would lower that amount that we are looking to increase our insurance because of our claims. And so, yes, the insurance part of every budget right now is kind of up in the air, unfortunately.
And then on that same line, do we have any idea when we will have some idea? I mean, will it be before the budget's passed? Will we know what insurance looks like next year, or do we have to wait until, later on to see what the bids look like?
No, we will be putting that out to bid this year. We will know and we'll have something in place signed before the end of the year is our plan. Just depends on how quickly a budget is passed, but our goal is we have to get something done by the end of the year if we're going to rebid this out, which we are, just to see if anybody can come in a lot lower than what we're looking at.
Right, because obviously that's going to have a pretty big impact on the budget.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions about the animal shelter budget? Great.
I'll go over archives. The archives budget went up just a little bit. I think it looks like the machinery, the lease on the machinery that we have is that will increase a little bit next year, as well as the dues and membership, which dues and membership are not just dues and membership that you would think. It's any service that is provided monthly can go into that. Any like subscription service can go into that. But anyways, that looks like that's going to increase just a little bit. And so overall, the archives budget is up $260 over last year because of those increases.
J.P. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I probably have heard at some point, but how are we doing the archive function without any staff in here?
We have staff. Miss Patty's actually down there once or twice a week, and then by appointment other than that. And so we are still fully serving the public when they need something. There are people that come in regularly. They work with Miss Patty on that, and so she's able to go down there and take care of it for
So
them.
basically, she's taken it over then?
She has taken it over, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions on the archives? I want to move briskly, but I don't want to cut off anybody. So if anybody just needs a moment, just feel free to raise your hand and I'll slow down, but we'll move on.
On to buildings and grounds. As you can see, the increase in buildings and grounds overall requested baseline is $26,000. Most of that is due to an estimated kind of projected increase in the cost of materials. And so that's kind of the baseline budget. There were some requests from buildings and grounds that I want to go over with you just for consideration. One of the big things is when looking into the roof issue with the annex and talking to the group that's going to come in and kind of work on our behalf with the insurance company to make sure we're getting adequate compensation. What we learned is that there is an industry-wide just standard COVID increase in materials and supplies of 17%. That's just what the companies are seeing. The materials, average overall are up pretty much 17%. And so we are requesting, there was a bit of about a $25,000 other professional services request that we would actually ask for an additional $25,000 to put that at $300,000 to cover any of those unexpected costs. I mean, it's hard to tell where we're going to be and at the time when we're going to be purchasing. Unlike a lot of stuff for our road department, if we need a bunch of gravel or we need tiles, we can order and buy all that in bulk in advance, and then we use them as we go. But with buildings and grounds, you don't really have you can't anticipate things going out on certain building issues, that sort of thing. So one thing to consider, and certainly would just be a consideration, would be an increase of $25,000 in addition to what's asked in the 2022 budget for the other professional services line item.
Give us some background on that. I mean, that's not just a supplies account. That's if the county has to use outside third parties to repair something or service calls, any of that kind of stuff.
That's a lot of things. That's right. I mean,
Okay.
one thing, for instance, that we ran into this year that was not anticipated, was not budgeted, was the amount of repair work that we contracted on the elevator in the courthouse annex. It was an unforeseen issue that came up that we were required to act, and we have to act quickly in getting that. As you're aware, we have made the decision now where we are, thanks to the appropriation from the quorum court, where we're going to have to just completely take that elevator out and build a new elevator inside. And we've already started that project, or the paperwork. It doesn't always, start completely, but the ball is rolling on that. So any unforeseen issue with the building, that's kind of where this comes from. And so all we can do is anticipate. We know that we're going to have issues. We know we're going to have things go out. We know we're going to have repairs that need to be made. It's hard to, fingers crossed that nothing catastrophic happens, like a bad ice storm or an earthquake or, something like that. Then we just kind of prepare for what we are used to seeing. And so in doing so, we know, and I think all of you can probably see and tell when you go to the grocery store or you go to a Lowe's or Home Depot, prices of everything are going up. Go to a restaurant and the prices of beef have gone up. So just a projection, and so we just have to kind of be prepared. And what it does is, it's not critical. I don't want you to think that it's something that the county's not going to be able to go forward. It's just in the event of something time sensitive or some emergency, it prevents us from having to necessarily wait and come back or call a special quorum court meeting to say, hey, we've got an expense. And so, a big one, yes, that's exactly what we'd have to do, or we'd have to dip into the emergency fund the judge has. But these are just ordinary day-to-day things that have to be taken care of.
JP Duncan.
And that was line item 3009.
That's correct.
So it looks like you're still budgeted below your 2020 expenditure rate, your 2019 and 18 expenditure rate. And you're talking about taking it up to 300K?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Is that enough?
We anticipate. We could come and ask for a lot more, but I think that is enough for us to feel good about what we have to work with. Enough for us to feel confident that we wouldn't have to come back and ask the quorum court for any more money.
Okay. Thank you.
JP Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This 3,000, I got two questions. The 3009 line item throughout this whole book gives me heartburn. Okay, we have a $100 line item for postage, and I understand what that is gonna go for. And right next to it, we have a $275,000 item for other professional services. I don't have a clue where that money goes. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying I don't have a clue. And you can
Sure.
give me an hint. The other thing in this budget that is making me crazy is line item 3052. It would seem to me that there would be a consistent percentage increase on that line item. We looked at budgets last week where that increased 450%. There are budgets in here where that line item went down. And that defies logic for me. I don't know whether you have an answer, but I'd like to know how we do that.
Well, I can answer the 3009 line item with the other professional services. Legislative audit is the one that assigns us our line items. And so they're the ones that determine, what you can pay out of what line item. Often if you pay something out of the incorrect line item, when the audit comes around in the next year, they'll ding you for it and say, hey, you should have used general supplies instead of small equipment because the description doesn't fit. And to be real honest, there's a lot of times that we look at things and go, okay, which does this better fit under? And a lot of times we ask legislative audit, hey, we're just wondering, here's what we spent it on. It could go either way. Can you give us some sort of, advice. And they're really good to work with us and work with the Comptroller's office on doing that to make sure we get those things done. And so the 3,000 with the other professional services line item, 3,009 is just kind of a catch-all. I mean, it's not management or computer services, engineer, agricultural, special legal. I mean, some of these have very specific, but I think the intent is you're always going to have something that doesn't fall perfectly in one of the other, we know what engineering and architectural is. That's pretty easy. But then there are always going to be something that may not fall directly into one of these categories. And so I think the 3009 is kind of that catch-all that allows us to have something to put it in when it doesn't fit, the square doesn't fit perfectly in the round peg necessarily on that. Right. The fire insurance is really just our insurance that covers all the buildings, the content, the computers, furnishings, and again, the issue we're having right now is on that is not really knowing what that's going to look like. So all of this what we do when we budget it's basically our best guess. You won't see, I would dare to say you won't see any budget where anyone goes into the fire and insurance, fire and extended coverage 3052 and ever takes anything out of there to move it to another line item to spend elsewhere. I think those are those things that everyone knows that we budget, and anything that we don't spend goes back, and if we need more, we have to come in and ask.
I mean, I understand that, Chief. What I don't understand is how this whole county government, every department that brings us a budget uses a different Ouija board to either increase or decrease that number. There ought to be some consistency, and if we've got an insurance consultant that tells us how to do that, he ought to be coaching us on that stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll reach out to him as well and see if we can't get something more consistent going forward on that.
J.P. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. That was the first of my three questions on buildings and grounds, is the insurance, because on the jails, it went from $77,000 to $360,000. On building and grounds, which I would assume is most of our buildings, most of them, we're going from $95,000 to $114,000. So something doesn't jive there, and I think that's what J.P. Johnson was getting at. And either we're coming in real low on some of them, or on the jail, we're coming in way too high, and I don't know which it is. So if there could be some refinement on that to see I assume it's based on quarterly billings of some kind, but any help we could get on that would be helpful. The next question I had was the offset to the electricity. It's gone down from 200,000 in 19 and 18 basically to 100,000. I'm assuming that was because of the energy project that you guys put in place. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what's the offset to that? Where do we see that? Is that debt service?
That's correct. That's the guaranteed savings that we were guaranteed by Johnson Controls over the life of the debt on that. So they have to guarantee us so much savings a year, and then we take that savings amount and we pay our debt service over the next 20 years, or I guess 19 or 18 now, until we get that bond paid off with their guaranteed service.
So when we go down to lines 5005 and 5006 for 22, in 05 it's 231,000, and 06 is 238,000. Is that all the energy project, or is there other debt service that is included there?
I think that's it. I would have to go back. I don't have those notes in front of me to see exactly what we're paying a year, but I know that number kind of is pretty steady, and then towards the end it goes up a little bit. And off the top, I don't have that with me to see exactly what our pay schedule looked like.
Do I interpret it right that we're having debt service of $469,000 and we saved $100,000?
There are, so some, not all this comes out of the building, not all of the electric costs, electricity comes out of buildings and grounds. There are other budgets that have electricity in as well that we were saving money over previous years to add to that. So buildings and grounds pays for some electricity, but like the animal shelter, not the animal shelter, JDC, the road department, they all have electricity line items in their budget as well. And so their budgets have come down. So you have to combine all of those, how we've reduced them that are coming up to pay this.
Has anybody done that to see how we're coming out?
Well, yes, we do, because we have to come out, because if we don't, then Johnson Control has to cut us a check. So we have to save the money that they say we're saving, or they have to pay the difference.
It has been analyzed, and we
Yeah.
feel like that we're coming out on it.
Correct.
then. Okay.
Right.
Pardon?
We do it, and legislative audit also takes a look at all that to make sure that that's exactly right. We get a lot of questions from them on that.
Okay, and the third item I wanted to ask about, and I think you've kind of touched on that, is that there's a general increase in costs because of COVID. When the jail budget came before us and the sheriff's budget, I asked if there were any additional expenses we were incurring in '22 or in '21 that are directly related to COVID that should be charged to the American Rescue Funds.
I don't know if we can attribute the increase in costs of goods and services directly to COVID. I mean, I think we call it a COVID increase. A lot of it also is inflation now, given the economy and what's going on.
Right.
And so I don't know that we can break down exactly. I think the industry standard just says the COVID cost, because we jumped 17%, which is not normal. I would say that some of it would obviously be from COVID, and then some of it would be just inflation.
So, for example, we're not buying any PPE or anything of that
No, anything like
nature
that we buy.
that could have been charged to this.
That's correct. These are just general supplies. I mean, the cost of food's gone up,
Right.
the cost of everything. PPE and anything COVID related, absolutely we would be dipping back into the American Rescue Plan and saying, hey, this is the expense that we're having because of this, and would be asking for that money to be appropriated.
Okay, so we do have a plan in place to try to look at those expenses and charge it to that account?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to piggyback off that a little. I think it's something that we should continue to explore and hear what other counties are doing. I know, there's a lot of that still going on and being vetted out. I also want to touch on, there's a request here for a couple additional janitorial positions.
That's correct.
And this justification letter screams to me that that's ARPA related. If not these new positions and these positions already. I mean, we read in that text that if somebody's job description is, at least partially, what I'm reading is you can come in and take at least a ratio of what their job duties are. And if these janitorial positions, I mean, like I'm saying, this justification letter just says that's their
Right.
main goal right now is increased cleaning and COVID mitigation. So I would like to explore that too, if we could reimburse this budget with some ARPA funds.
Okay, we can do that, yes. That's the one, I hadn't gotten to that, but that's the other request is for 2 additional janitorial positions. I think you have a justification letter that was provided that kind of goes over that. We'll certainly look into that. I think there was also sent out to everyone a request of some salary increases based on some certifications. We haven't really had a chance to fully vet that out, so we'll kind of rescind that. We're not going to be asking for that. Well, we'll let you know that in looking at that, and I'll be prepared to talk about it. I can talk about it now, or we can wait till a later date. We do have some people in our buildings and grounds that are starting to receive certifications that we've never had. The county has historically never had these certifications. For example, our buildings and grounds director, along with his assistant, his lead foreman, lead man foreman, and our maintenance night supervisor are FMP certified, which is Facility Management Practices. They're the only 3 in the state of Arkansas that have that certification. All of these certifications help us when it comes to taking care of our facilities and not having to hire and contract out third parties that have those certifications. In addition, our master electrician's going through a certified building operator course that he's working through with Ozarks Electric. That's going to allow him to do more work on our Johnson Control system without us having to spend money to get someone outside to come in and maintenance that facility or provide maintenance to that should we need that. And we also have one of our guys is getting his HVAC certification, which is a big deal as well. And so we're thinking that we may come back maybe the first of the year and kind of look at, I know that there's some other departments that have people that get certain certifications and milestones to kind of look at and say, hey, if our guys are getting these certifications, can we give them a one-time or a bump or whatever it is that we do? And so we'll kind of pull that out for now, but just kind of put that on your radar that we may look for something that, and not just for buildings and grounds, but countywide. We know we have people that have the ability to get certifications, and those certifications end up saving us a lot of money. And so it's one of those things that we want to try to reward people that are going to, have their full-time job and then spend after hours with their families studying and taking tests and getting certified, that we may look to provide some incentive for those people, those employees that are going to do that.
Yes, I love that, and I want to take a moment to say, just because it's in the budget for next year it's not in the budget doesn't mean it won't happen. I mean, I want to continue to have these conversations throughout next year, even if we're conservative with the budget. I think that's what we owe the employees, right? I would commit myself to that.
Workforce is a tremendous issue across the state, and keeping and retaining people is, you gotta look at all those type of things. So if people are out there extending themselves, getting certifications and all, that's just gonna make them that much more hireable by somebody else. And so what can we do to make sure that we're retaining those as best as possible if they're going ahead and getting that additional certification and the things that's gonna benefit the county? So appreciate you guys thinking about that.
Great. Is that wrap up your buildings and grounds?
That's it.
Any other questions by the justices? Okay, thank you, sir.
Move on to our comptroller's budget. The comptroller's budget is an overall increase of just under $5,000. There was one big jump that I wanted to point out to you, and that's in the 3001 line item, the accounting and auditing. It's a $2,500 increase ask. The reason for that is we have to use an outside audit firm to do our grants auditing. State audit does not do that. We're required by law to get an outside firm to do that for us. And then for state and federal purposes, because federal grants have to have that. So we had an issue. We kind of, like most audits, we're on the, we pay this year for the audit from last year type thing. And so I talked to Director Worthen today. A couple years ago, that amount that we were paying that private firm, because of some problems that we had, jumped our price up a little bit. And so we have recently, because of that, we were fortunate that we had there was money to pay that, so we didn't have to come and ask for anything out of general to pay that between the grants department and the comptroller's office. But we've got a contract now where we are contracting them for a certain amount and a not-to-exceed amount. And the not-to-exceed amount is the $15,000. And so we're confident that, regardless of what happens, regardless of any issues, we won't exceed the $15,000. Hopefully, we'll come in several thousands below that, and it'll kind of be a wash altogether.
And that's gonna be critical with the American Rescue Plan dollars.
Grab that mic, Judge Wood.
And that's gonna be critical with the American Rescue Plan. I think as counties and cities start looking at this, there are gonna be some expenses that they're gonna need to incur if they've never had a federal audit done. And by Washington County having grants from the federal government, we're used to having, in fact, they just left not too long ago. So it's critical that we obviously have a federal audit on staff and that we continue to pay. But I think we're gonna see across the country, a lot of those are gonna be snapped up, and the cost of that is obviously gonna be elevated because everybody's gonna need it because you're gonna have a federal audit with this American Rescue Plan.
Absolutely, and I'll share that when we were at the AAC meeting a couple weeks ago, I found it interesting that they said now we basically have to fall under state and federal guidelines
right.
with the ARPA money. And that if there's any question about which guideline applies, pick the most restrictive one. And so, I mean, that's kind of a headache. JP Esri.
Thank you. I just have a question on the DocuSign appears in two different places. I'm just curious as to why it does. It appears under the dues and membership, not just on this one, but on a number of the different accounts. I'm just curious as to why it appears two places.
So we divide that contract up by the various departments based on the usage that we have. Some departments have, like my office uses it a lot. Purchasing, comptroller's office, HR, we use it a lot. There are some others that use it periodically, and so they get less of the lion's share, but we've kind of split that, divvied that up so that we didn't have a huge increase in one budget, that we're all kind of taking care of paying our fair share for our DocuSign contract.
But my question is, why is it under dues and memberships and under, so in other words, it's in 3090 and 3102?
So I think that's probably a typo. I believe, well, no, I know what it is. There are two different portions of that contract. We have our regular, standard, just contract to have the service that we have. And then there's a part of that service the part of that contract that it deals with just the technical services that are provided. This is a legislative audit thing. Because of that, you have to pay those out of two different line items. So we have a contract, and the service, just for the standard DocuSign service, comes out of the dues and memberships. But the technical assistance portion of that contract, which is a few $1,000s, comes out of the software support maintenance agreement. Sorry, I thought you meant the various departments were splitting it, so that's all I have for the Comptroller.
Any questions, any other questions on the Comptroller report?
Moving on to the county attorney budget. Overall is just a decrease in what the ask. The only increase was the ordinance that was passed changing the county attorney's salary was the only increase. But as far as the non-personal services line items in the county attorney's budget, I think we're just down 1.2%.
Any discussion or questions? J.P. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I don't recall why dues and memberships went up. And not from 21 to 22, but when you look historically there.
Those, well, when we added a second attorney, we had a lot more dues and memberships. I don't think that the 20,000 is needed. And we'll look at next year to see, after 2 years of having that, exactly where we are in the coming years. But those are things that have to be paid, bar dues, bar memberships, those things come out of that.
For the second legal.
For the second legal, that's correct.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Additional questions? Okay.
County judge's budget is flat overall. A small increase in non-professional services, but that I think was kind of a wash on everything. So his budget's pretty much sitting pretty flat. I think it's actually $40.13 less this year than the ask last year.
Any questions or discussion on the county judge's budget? Okay, we'll move forward.
The library, county library, we don't have the budget. You have something here, but we don't have the actual budgets ready because their board hasn't met to finalize their budget. That'll be later this month. As you're probably aware, the county library funding pretty much straight funnels from the state to us and then from us out. So this isn't money that we're spending necessarily out of county reserve or the county general, even though it's in county general. Most of these, I'd say 99.9% of it, if not 100% of it, is all reimbursed by the state. So when we get that, I will come back or shoot an email or get it out however you want to say, hey, here's what they've approved. Their board has to approve their budget before they give it to us for you guys to approve. And the reason it happens the same time every year. It's just a matter of how they have to approve it from the state. And that's why it's not something they can just bump up and do earlier. It's kind of set by state rules on when they can do that.
Questions or discussion? We'll move forward.
In our DEM budget, you'll notice that there is quite an increase overall. The reason for that is due to the situation with the 911 fees. Historically, the 911 fee was set up, and there was a fee assessed to your landline phone that you got charged a little additional. If you remember your old AT&T bills, you'd have a little bit of a 911 surcharge there, like 25 cents or 20 cents a month or something like that. And that all went to the county. With cell phones coming out, that has changed, and the cities actually get the money on the cell phones. The county is only getting money from people that actually have landlines, which are few and far between and are dying off every day more and more. So our 911 budget for this next year is pretty much going to be non-existent. Because of that, we are still, as the county, we are still required to do the 911 mapping and provide those 911 services. Now, we don't screen calls or anything like that, but we assign the addresses for 911. We do the mapping for 911. We do everything so that all of our emergency service provider partners can have the information they need to get to where it is that they need to get to. So with that budget pretty much drying up, we've had to move several, that we used to split some positions. Their salaries were split between the 911 and the general. We're moving that half back over, and then we have one 911 person who we're having to move his entire salary into our DEM. And so this is an issue. I think there's been a lot of discussion statewide with between the counties and the state on this. It's something we're working on or have been working on, trying to resolve, and it's probably something we're eventually going to have to kind of get the cities to come to the table and say, hey, we're required to provide this service for you, and hope they'll say, we understand, and we're going to help you make sure that we can continue to provide those services. But in the meantime, we got to move those over so that we can make sure that our people continue to get paid. And any money that comes in, we can then, refund the general fund if we were able to come to some sort of agreement or look toward the future or something like that.
Questions or discussion?
Currently, our emergency, just to let you know, our DEM crew, our director and assistant director are both in Louisiana with our USAR teams from Rogers, Springdale, Bentonville, Fayetteville, and Siloam Springs. Down there doing search and rescues and trying to help people through Hurricane Ida. So I just wanted to let you know that things appear to be a lot better than they thought they would be. So that's good news for them. So hopefully come back here safe and sound.
JP Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I got a little confused when we were talking about moving salaries back. There's a note on page 137 that half the salary of the DEM Fire Service Director is paid by 911. So is that still true? Or is all of that moved back over and just, it hadn't caught up with these pages?
So it hasn't caught up with these pages. That's the we're asking that all of these be moved back over to county general.
Back on to general
Right,
revenue.
that's what we're asking for. There will be some money for 2022. We don't anticipate that it's going to be enough. And so instead of having to do that halfway through the year or an appropriation, we're just asking that we go ahead on the front end and move those back to the county general so that our guys are paid for and, get their salary. And then we're going to continue to work with finding the funds to help offset some of these costs.
So as far as approving this budget, we're needing to add another $38,000, perhaps more, to the numbers that we see here. We're showing 129 for full salary full-time for, we're showing 129,000 for 2022, and that matches page 137, but we're needing to add the 38 to that. Is that somewhere else, or are we just needing to make that change?
Say it again on page what, 137?
Has that already been added in, or are we gonna have to add that?
Yeah, it's been added on page 36.
Okay. It's, Director Worthing says it's been added on page 136.
It says 129,411 on page 137. It says 129,411 on page 20, or 136.
Right,
So those
I think this
numbers
is
match.
there's a revised page.
It is one of the
It's
revisions.
a revised page
Okay.
of 8.
So that's been added?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Okay.
correct, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to environmental affairs.
Oh, one
sorry.
second. We're going to have JP Esri.
I'd just like to go back to the 911, and as I've kind of reviewed that and looked at that, and I know you touched on this, but as strongly as we can, we're going to urge you to get together with the cities and see what we can do, because I know some of the other counties have had the same fight, and that the cities have been more than willing because of the service that we give to, and so I encourage you to really pursue that path. Thank you.
Mayor Sprouse sits on the board for the, this whole 9/11 dispatch consolidation and all, so he's very well aware, the Mayor Jordan is aware. And so again, the state is looking at this as a whole, as we shrink the number of dispatches across the state. The original piece was we would just have one dispatch per county. I think they've come to realize that you can't just have maybe just one in Benton, Washington County, Pulaski County, so they're going to probably look at changing some of their formula. But then in that same process, we're hoping that they'll also look at, with all the monies being in the cities because of cell phones as opposed to landlines, how do we make sure that those counties who are doing the 911, putting the numbers in, the addresses in, getting that information to the census. You couldn't do the census without having addresses, et cetera. So our 911 is critical, and so we're going to need those dollars. And so hopefully the state will continue to work with us to get that rectified.
Additional questions or discussion? Okay, we'll move on.
Environmental Affairs, as you can see, they're actually down quite a bit overall. Currently, just to kind of give you an update, because I know this, we kind of ran into this last year with our animal shelter, where they were working on getting a vehicle, and then because of COVID, they couldn't get the vehicle before the end of the year, so we had to come and say, hey, we had all the money, can we just move it into the account? And it kind of was an issue. So just to let you know, they have saved up and they have the money to buy a new grapple truck. That's what they take out when they have roadside dumps to go pick the trash up, put it in the truck. The one they have, they're kind of borrowing from the road department, kind of been, limping along, helping out, using that. But we have one, it's local, it's got to be built. We're in the process of getting that going. We did all the bidding and everything that we're required to do. And so just want to kind of let all of you know that depending on how that happens and what delays it goes into, it could be another situation like that in the first of next year of us saying, hey, we had the money in the budget, here it is. We didn't get to spend it in 2021 because we couldn't get it, it wasn't ready in time, and we'd like that appropriated because all that'll be washed back in or absorbed back into our carryover. So just kind of want to give you a heads up on that. We also have our fall cleanup is coming pretty soon. There will be information on our webpage in the calendar to kind of let the citizens know of our countywide cleanup. That's the project that we do twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. People can go to Boston Mountain, people can go to Waste Management and take any, large items they have up to a certain amount and dump those free of charge, and we actually pay for that to try to help keep their properties cleaned up and keep from having eyesores around the county. It's kind of a service we provide.
Mechanically, I would rather not budget for another truck next year and have you guys come to us if it doesn't go through. But I also would remind the rest of the court that that's going to take some discipline on our part because I was a little bit disappointed on the way we handled the animal shelters funds at the first part of this year. With us carrying over, this is in the middle of a term, if we don't get the truck purchased this year, we all need to remember that it's something that was just timing issue and we need to make that whole again next year. Does that make sense to everybody? I think that's proper budgeting.
Sure.
Not to budget the truck again, on the expectation that it might fall through.
Right.
But also know that this is a need for you guys, and just because it, once again, kind of hearkening back to my previous statement, just because it doesn't make it into the budget doesn't mean it can't happen. That's the way I would prefer to handle it, but I also realize, like I'm saying, it takes discipline on the rest of us to follow through with that if you need to have the.
Sure, and that's the $108,250. And so if we don't end up making the purchase this year, then that'll be $108,000 back into the county general. So it's not like the money will be spent. But I've talked to Director Coleman about that, and we're going to try our hardest to get this done and paid for and taken care of by the end of the year, so that this isn't an issue we have to revisit. I just wanted it to be on your radar, so that if it came up, it's not kind of out of left field that, hey, we didn't really know about that, because that's kind of what happened to us with the animal shelter. We didn't anticipate that it wouldn't go through, and then it didn't go through, and I think it was kind of a surprise. So just kind of want to make sure we don't have that happen. Our grants department is, other than their, professional services, longevity, stuff like that that's gone up, the rest of their budget is flat or down actually 0.3%. So, and we'll have a banner year of grants this year.
Questions or discussion on the grants department? Grants administration? Okay.
Same thing with HR. We have the only thing that's gone up is professional services, the longevity, what'd I say? Personal services. The 1,000 line item numbers, health insurance, unemployment, longevity, life insurance, those things that tick up regardless of what you do. You're always going to have those little ticks throughout the year. That's the only thing that's gone up in their budget.
Questions on HR budget?
Okay, IT. So I think there's a revised IT budget, and without these things, without the asks that I'm going to kind of lay at your feet tonight to consider, overall, the IT budget is down $80,752 from last year. And so that's their base ask. There are a couple of things that they are asking you to consider, or we are asking you to consider for next year. One is in the explanation letter, is replacing the cameras at JDC. Our cameras at JDC, some of which don't work. That's a liability. It's an issue for us. They're not cameras that you can replace anymore. They don't make them anymore, so we can't just fix them and do. We really need to replace the camera system. It's an old camera system. The quality of the pictures that we get is not as good as it probably needs to be in a facility like that where we have juveniles. And so we are needing to replace the camera system, and they've provided a quote of just under $43,000 to replace that camera system for consideration for a capital outlay. In addition to that, we are asking to create a new position for software support specialist. As a lot of you are aware, we switched to a new financial software a couple years ago, last year before last. And trust me, it's not without its problems. What I've gathered through that whole process is there's not any comprehensive financial software program out there that's not without its problems. I think it's like anything. You can talk to people that have bought certain products from certain vendors, and they'll tell you all the problems they have. But with that, we have spent a considerable amount of money, and we have this program that we are using, and we continue to work to get it to work the way we want it to work and need it to work. And we have been spending a considerable amount of money on working with their techs to get stuff to happen. It's quite expensive, like $250 an hour to have them come in and fix something or get something working that needs to be. We are asking for a full-time position for someone that's dedicated to that system. We have an IT employee right now who is a whiz with writing the code and understands. I mean, he's been with us on the ground floor. So I know that there's a possibility to have people out there that either know or can quickly learn that system. So we're not having to spend $250 an hour, which is going to amount. I mean, we're looking at like $100,000 a year in asking the company to come in and provide these services for us, in addition to what we're already paying. And so, adding a software support specialist who that's their only job, that's all they have to work on. They're dedicated to that. They know that system in and out. I think would save us quite a bit of money, and it would be very beneficial because we would get things done and corrected in, quickly. Right now, we're at the mercy of the vendor to get it done whenever they get around to it, if it's not something we can fix in-house. And so this is the request for that is one, I think overall it will save us money in the future on what we're spending on those maintenance charges. And two, it will let us do a lot more with our system and let our system work a lot better than what it's working right now. And so that's one position that IT is asking. It's a new position. The second position is not a new position, but it's a little bit of a change. As it stands right now, we have a GIS staff position that is split between the road department and emergency management. As some of you know, GIS is our mapping system that we use. 911 has their own GIS person that does their mapping. We use a lot of this mapping. A lot of it's used for roads, but a lot of it's used for other electeds and other people in the county. We can do a lot with our GIS mapping. And we have someone that has quite a bit of experience in that area. And so we're looking to change that position. And I believe that you got an email on that. If not, I can get you the email, but I think it was sent to you by Director Worthing. We're looking at changing the GIS position to a GIS coordinator, and it's an increase of $11,064. And so that would be split between the road department and IT, and that person would actually be housed with IT, whereas right now they're housed down at the South Campus, but they work nonstop with our IT department. And so you got that, and you got some updates that would show what the updates are, but I think that's about a $6,800 ask for one for the roads and one for IT, for us to change that position over to a coordinator and let it work within IT, the IT budget, to provide the services that we need it to provide. And so with that, I think that's it for IT.
Back up, clarify that for me. You have a person in each department right now, right? And you're splitting the person between roads and IT, is that correct?
Right now, they're split between roads and DEM.
Okay.
DEM is not in need of that. We spend a lot of time in other departments outside of road and DEM with our GIS
So
mapping.
you're moving it out of DEM into IT.
That's correct,
And
moving
make
it
that
out
a
of
full-time
DEM
role.
into IT. And because we already have that position, it's the amount to put it up to that GIS coordinator position, the total is $11,000. Because we're not, creating a new position, it's just a bump. It's going from it's going up to a grade 20,
22, I believe.
something like that.
The letter says grade 22, I believe.
Okay. So that would be the increase on it when we had it reevaluated.
Questions or discussion on the IT budget? All right, we'll move forward.
I'll commend our IT. I know people probably at home are like, please stop. But I will say, because we don't get a chance to brag on our guys a lot. Got an email yesterday morning, something fried some of our wires over at the annex building, and it had the public defenders were offline. Their computers and their phones were down. And so we had somebody starting at 8 o'clock yesterday morning, and they finished up at 5 o'clock this morning and getting that system back up and running. I got an email from Ms. Houston, the Chief Deputy Public Defender, letting us know how appreciative they were and getting it back up. And so we have some top-notch guys in our IT department, and they put in some hours. And so they're a good group of guys, and all these changes that we see are things that we see being very beneficial to the county and doing some things that we've never seen before as we move forward. That'll be beneficial to the electeds, to our employees, and really to our citizens, and getting some services out there that they've not seen before. So, moving on to JDC. The budget that was submitted to you to JDC was down $32,549. I do have one thing that she's asked for you to consider looking at in her department, and there's two things. One is not going to affect the budget at all, and I think it's probably something easy that we can get taken care of. So this has come from feedback. I think we've talked before. JDC is one of those places that it's hard to keep staff. Like I've said before, unlike the sheriff's office where they have detention officers, you come in as a detention officer at the sheriff's department in order to get to the enforcement side. That's kind of how you work your way up in that system. With JDC, you don't get that. You come in as a detention officer, and that's all you'll ever be, is a detention officer. And so retention there is kind of hard. Y'all have worked, and we appreciate what's been done in the past to, get those salaries up. I think that, if the plan that has been discussed about moving the salary range goes forward, that's going to help us as well. But one thing she talked to her staff about, and one thing she thinks would be beneficial, and this would not be a change to the budget at all, would be changing the titles. She wants to retitle the positions. Director would be retitled to major, basically ranks like you have with the sheriff's office and military, major, captain, lieutenant, sergeant, and corporal. And so they wouldn't have these, youth care worker. It would be a detention corporal or a detention sergeant, which we think would attract more inquiries and more people. Just one thing to look at. The other thing is she's got a request for she's got an assistant position that she wants to retitle to a staff assistant position. Right now, this assistant position was only working for the assistant director of JDC, and was working kind of in the back in their office space. What she'd like to do is she'd like to take that position and have it expand a little bit so that person has the ability to also work the floor. They can work in the computer area where they can, monitor the cells if needed, open the doors. Can also get some training as, the detention officer training, so that if they are low on staff, this person can step in and help out. Right now, the position they have, that's not possible. And with the turnover that we see and we have, it would be beneficial for us to have a person that, you know, is a backup, kind of somebody that doesn't come in every day to work the floor, that if there is a need, we've got somebody that can come and work the floor. And so depending on where that would be, it's going to be, the position would be either 29,917 or 31,052, based on where they are in the grade scale. I've got a letter I've not provided to you all. I will provide to you tonight, and I'll make sure I email out to everybody as well, that you can, you know, something to think about on changing that position to allow for some more, that person to do a little bit more than what they're doing right now.
So changing the position adds a whole 30,000.
I don't think so. This was her
Just
numbers
switching
and what it would be. It's probably going to be about a third of that.
Right.
Part-time to make it full-time, right? Wasn't it
It was a part-time.
Part-time
It's
going
an open part-time position. I think what her letter is stating was that the budgeted amount would be 29,000 to 31,000, but then we'd also be taking away, that you would reduce well, you can't see part-time on here. 22,000 was what it was budgeted for in 2021. So, like I said, we're looking at a $10,000 increase, roughly, at the most.
Well, I think we've got to commit ourselves to do what we have to for JDC. That's an essential county function that we can only do. And the title changes is a no-brainer to me if that's what they want. I've talked to Director Collins, and she's mentioned that to me too, and I'm sure that's something that Personnel Committee could help her with. But if that's something that takes an action by the Quorum Court, I say bring it and let's get it done. If that seems like a very simple fix that we could help out there with, so.
Absolutely.
Discussion. JP Duncan.
Just looking at the salaries line item, the way I read it, the JDC director actually makes less than the assistant director. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why?
Longevity. That's you know, and when we talked about our, this kind of went back into the discussion about sliding our scale a little bit. We have a lot of people, a lot of county employees that have been here a long time, and they've received pay increases year after year after year. And so you've got some that are way outside their pay scale. So this whole moving that pay scale to 10% or whatever the court may decide to do isn't going to be as detrimental, because we're not moving everybody 10%. We're moving the scale 10%. There'll be a lot of people that it won't affect because they're still going to be outside their pay range. There's only going to be a few that are actually going to fall down below that will have to move up, and that's where the cost comes in. But our assistant director at JDC, she's been there a very long time. And so over the years, she is, you know, what happens is with our JDC director position, when a new person came in, you know, Director Mack was making quite a bit more than this. But when she retired and we brought in a new person, we have to drop them all the way back to the bottom of that pay scale. And so they go down, and so yes, you've got somebody here who's an assistant director, who's actually Kendrick, who's making a little bit more than the director because of how long he's been there.
Okay. Just, that was surprising to me to see someone that reports to the director making more money than the director. But anyways, thank you.
JP Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take it that we're still having a very difficult time retaining employees in spite of the changes we've already made. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we've had some issues as of recent where we've had to let some people go for violating some of our rules, which is unfortunate. A lot of these guys are they're good people. Sometimes they're working more than one job, or I know one particular individual couldn't get their sleep schedule down and was having a hard time getting on because they were working nights and hadn't been used to working nights. And so, you know, yes, we are having a difficult time, and unfortunately, sometimes we have to let them go for violating policy.
Right.
It's a safety issue.
And it's more than our JDC, and JDC is clearly having some of that, but again, Friday, we met with the law enforcement from around the region, and again, all of them are trying to figure out how do we come up with a signing bonus to attract people. No one can keep people, and it's not just here in Northwest Arkansas, it's across the state, and it is a tremendous, and this is a hard work. I mean, it's being the JDC, working over there at JDC, working as a law enforcement officer, I mean, it's tough work. Our road department, we thought we were staffed up almost 100% less than a month ago, and it starts to drop back off. So it's just tough across the board. So anyway.
Thank you.
I think also, I think that position begs for some consideration in terms of ARPA, in terms of incentive pay. I know that's a possibility. The scary part to me is some of the challenges I'm hearing too from staffing, is that money might not be the only fix there. And so that's, I want you guys to hear, we're here I want Director Collins to know we're here to do whatever we can to help. We're here to partner with you guys when you guys come up with solutions and ideas to let us know, and we'll try to do what we can on our level to help you out.
Sure, we appreciate it. And I'll let you know, one of the things that I think Director Collins is seeing is, we have these open positions and we're getting plenty of applicants. Just none of them show up to the interview. And to be real honest, we've talked about it, and if you're unemployed, I think this may be driving some of it, is that, you have to show that you've applied for some jobs, and that's about all you got to show. And the workforce, Department of Labor and Workforce, or whatever it's called, doesn't always follow back up with the employer, say, hey, did this person show up for their job? And so it's part of continuing your unemployment benefits, and that's unfortunate. I wish that wasn't the truth of the matter, and don't get me wrong, it's not with everybody, but I would say that Director Collins thinks that's a big part of why people don't show up. Yeah. So nothing we can do about that, but, it is one of those things.
The labor market's very tight.
It is. It is.
Additional questions or discussion? All right, we'll move forward.
Moving on to planning. Overall, we're down $7,793 in the planning department. So no big ask there for anything.
Questions or discussion for planning? All right.
Purchasing, up 1%, $173.52. That's all in personal services, longevity pay, that sort of thing. So there's nothing, no big changes as far as the overall general ask of the other services and supplies in the budget.
JP John.
Question, tell me what's covered in line item 3054.
It's under services.
3054. Let me see if I can. Purchasing has typically paid, used to pay all of a particular type of insurance that has kind of been started to be divided back up amongst the electeds. That was actually paying all, and I think we divvied that up a few years ago to start letting people kind of pay their fair share. Let me see if I can figure this out. I don't know, honestly, off the top of my head, but I might be able to figure it out for you.
It looks like another miscellaneous code to me, and miscellaneous codes
General liability.
make me crazy.
Notary. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but I can find out what we've used that line item for and get it sent out.
Anytime you're using the word sundry in a financial line item, it calls attention to itself, right?
Okay. Again, we don't make the line items.
That's
We
right.
just
I mean, I understand that, but
use what we have.
additional questions or discussion on that?
Some of the work comp people on there. And sundry.
Yeah, on the comp, and she does pay some insurance for the whole county out of her budget for some.
That could be some with workers' comp or something. I'll get that. I'll get an email out to
Yeah,
everybody.
can you make a
and let
note of that? Just try to follow up with us,
Sure.
at least
do.
through an email, just to see what that is.
Moving on to the roads budget. There's an explanation that was given in the very beginning, the increased explanations in the road fund. It talks about why there's increases in certain line items. Again, like buildings and grounds, roads is a big one that we really get hit hard with just material costs going up. And so, in budgeting and moving forward, we look at kind of what we've had, what we've gone through this year and previous years, kind of how those trends are rising. And so it's kind of the way we budget on our road material to see kind of what's going to happen based on those trends. And so those were, that's kind of where that increase is coming from. It's let's see, overall increase of about 350,000. And again, I think Director Crowder has gone through and shown the exact increases and why he's increased or asked for an increase in those particular line items.
It's a big number, but it's an overall increase of 4%. I don't know what we make of that.
Trying to see if I have any more information here. No, he's got the same thing. We have, some of it comes, let's see.
25% in fuel.
Right, which could be even more than that. General supplies based on the fencing, big on fencing. When we come in and we widen a road, we go in and we set people's fencing back. We'll set fencing back for them. And so try to use what they have, but if we have to, we'll put whatever we have to put out as well. It's part of kind of what we do in order, they'll give us they'll give us the pushback or the setback some when we go in and widen a road that's not normally there. Sometimes, a lot of times we have to remove trees, and fences are built along the tree line. And so we try to do our best to help the citizen out because even though it's a county right-of-way, it's never been used as a county right-of-way. And so you're taking a big part of somebody's land. And so we try to be good neighbors when we do that and help them out. We didn't used to do that. That's not something we always provided, something that changed when Judge Wood's administration came in of saying, hey, what can we do to be better partners? And that's one of those things, and people appreciate that when you're coming in and widening the road. Everybody wants a good road, but it also it hurts when part of your land is taken. So that's one of those things. Again, big jump in fuel. Engineering on Kenyon Lake Road bridge repair. I mean, we've got some really big roads and some big repairs that we're looking to do in the coming year. We've got some bridges that we've been talking to the state about. They've gone and done some inspections for us and some repairs we've got to do. That's one of the things one of the changes we've made this year and going into next year. We have spent a whole lot of time in the past 3.5 years, really aggressively adding paved roads, adding chip seal, which is great, and it was very much needed and is very much needed. But you get to that point where you've got to stop for a little while and you've got to address road conditions and washouts and road issues. And so that's kind of what we've been geared towards doing this year, and for the part of next year is kind of getting all of our roads that we didn't get to just maintain as much as we needed to, take care of those, and then we can get back on our aggressive approach again, hopefully going forward to chip seal a lot more roads and to get a lot more dirt roads turned into paved roads for our citizens. And so it just kind of ebbs and flows, and of course, again, don't have to say anything else about the increase in materials at this point.
Questions or discussion? JP Johnson.
Yeah, excuse me, question on, we're hiring engineers to design road repairs. Are we intending to self-perform that work, or will we contract that work?
The road repairs or the engineering?
The bridge repairs, or,
The bridge, so
excuse me, I'm reading that as, I thought that was a bridge. That's Kenyon Lake Road Bridge. Are we repairing bridges or roads?
depends on what we're having to do. So we will do what we can, what we feel like we can do safely, what we know that we can do. In the event that it's something major, that's when we will bid out and we'll get a professional group to come in that has more experience. We don't want to get back into the position that county was in several years ago, and so we are very cognizant of that and look to do what we can, what we feel comfortable in doing, and then turning over what we can't to someone else.
Okay, and then on 2002, is it a fair statement then that the radio system the road department uses is not the same radios that we pass the sales tax for?
That's correct.
Okay.
JP Wilson.
Is it true that we require a CDL of all of our road employees? If I've not
so.
misunderstood, that's what I've heard. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That way we have people that can drive machinery and anytime transport things. That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, even to go out and when we have ice and snow, to drive a dump truck, you got to have a CDL. And so those guys, you know, even if that's not what they do every day, when we get weather like that, we put all of our guys in trucks. And we basically double up all of our trucks so that we have 2 people out. We have a driver and a passenger that can help. We can help stranded motorists. It's 2 eyes in the dark when you got snow and ice. It's a lot safer for us. And so we require all those guys to be able to do that when needed.
Is there anything in the works to try to do something on the pay of our heavy equipment drivers, operators, et cetera?
There is. We've talked about it, and we're looking at changing up. You know, historically, all we ever had were HEOs, heavy equipment operators. That was everything. Over the past 4 years, we've made some changes to HEOs 1 versus HEO 2 based on what you're doing. We have looked at getting some guys and changing some titles up to where we have road grader operator, a truck driver, stuff like that, to kind of get it more geared towards exactly what they're doing. And so those are things that we have been working on and looking at and will continue to look at and try to implement. We try to implement these things in a way that has the least economic impact or detriment to the budget. So we try to roll these things out here slowly and surely to kind of get things changed, so we're not all, going in and asking for a big change and it costs the county a bunch of money. But those are things that we have looked at and continue to work to change to better identify what those positions are.
I haven't studied the staff here and this enough to know, what the key operators are, but some of you've got down as low as $13.17 for one of the operators, one of the heavy equipment operators. So I don't know. In our competitive market, I'm assuming that JP Johnson knows better than I do what it would take to hire somebody to do some of this stuff, but it just looks like we may be getting totally out of touch. Pardon? So somehow we, at least for key positions, if our roads aren't getting graded, our constituents aren't happy. So.
That's correct. And we've also, we've added recently some additional road graders. I think that for those of you that have county, we've got, we have at least one. I think we're trying to fill the second one if we haven't already filled it for floaters and our road graders. And those are guys that get to go out. We have our road graders who have their routes, and they, historically have their routes unless they get pulled off to take care of something. But these floaters will actually allow us to spot treat roads when we get calls that may not be on the schedule for a while, to have a road grader go back down. It also gives us somebody, when we have a road grader that's out either sick or on vacation, then our schedule isn't getting messed up. And so I agree, and that's something we will continue to look at and work on, is kind of where we are. I know JP Lemming is real big on wanting to get that, and so that's certainly something that we'll continue to work towards, is taking care of these guys and that take care of our roads.
One of the things that we talked about, obviously, is shifting the pay grades, and so that'll give hopefully some help in some of that. My suggestion would be that, again, personnel would consider looking every year. We have Johansson come back with the recommendations and moving pay grades to keep up with market and how we're standing with market. But we have not really moved it since 2016, I guess. So now we're looking at moving it every other year, maybe, to consider go ahead and shifting and moving, so our in particular our road guys across the county, period, we don't get too far behind, whether we make it all the way to market or not. But if we don't, we're at least a year or two behind, and not 5 and 6 years behind, because again, it makes it easier for them to go elsewhere. Right. For very little or nothing, 50 cents, $1 more somewhere else, that's a significant amount. And so anyway, I'm glad we're at least looking at and addressing that. And again, it's been something that we've been talking about and trying to work toward, and so this starts that movement.
Okay, thank you.
In the
Just a second.
oh, sorry.
You got to get your mic going. JP Essering.
Thank you. One of the things is that we're showing a difference here of almost 12%. But my question is, this comes from multiple funding sources. And I know that there are several departments like this that have, for example, on the emergency management, it was included in the budget, but the funding for that came from the sales tax. And so I guess this is more maybe at Director Worthen, but if we could have something that tells us what comes from the general fund and what doesn't, I think that would help us get a better idea of kind of where we're going, if you could do that for us.
I don't think any of this in the 2,000 line item, it's the general fund, but it's the road fund within the general fund. So the money that is in here is, you know, for the taxes that the county collects, some of them are earmarked, part of that's earmarked for roads. And that's where this fund comes from. And so even if you reduce this down, you can't take this money and put it back into the 1,000 general fund to spend in any other department. It has to remain in this 2,000 fund.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that we need to know how much this is going to affect the general fund, and if the money is coming from multiple sources, we need to have those separated out so we'll know the difference as to where we will be, if that makes sense.
Sure, we can get that. We can get that broken down.
Thank you.
JP Wilson.
I'm sorry, I did have one other question. On page 183, the $400,000 for cell phone, pager, and radio, is there an explanation of what that is, what we're doing there? It's not something we normally have a lot of money in.
Yeah, so that would cover all the cell phones that our guys have out in the field, as well as our supervisors now have tablets. We've got a new system that we've implemented for road mapping. We have basically we've got a group that's come in and they put sensors on. We haven't gotten all of our fleet done, so we're kind of doing a little bit at a time. But these sensors go on these vehicles, and as someone's driving with the GPS system that it's hooked up to, it monitors kind of in real time what the condition of the road is, how bumpy it is. If there's a pothole, it'll let you know. And so this new system allows us to go in real time as well. When someone calls down to the road department now, which is, you know, we're getting way high tech for the road department, because, you know, a year ago you called down to the road department and said, hey, I've got an issue on County Road 100, and somebody would write it down and they'd stick it in the supervisor's box, and then when the supervisor came in later that day or the first of the next morning, they would get it and they'd put it in their pile of papers, and then they'd work on them as they go. Because of what this system we have that has you know, tablets inside the vehicles, they get in real time. They'll be told that there's an issue with the road. The supervisors can break them down based on where they are. They can break them down based on where their crews are. And so depending on what it is, the complaint or what the issue is, little different icons to kind of let you know. You can click on it, you can go in, a supervisor can go out, look at it, take a picture, upload the picture so that the grader operator or construction crew, whoever it is, can see exactly what the issue is, so they'll know what to do to fix it. And so that takes into account all of the electronics that are needed for that, and it allows us to actually, when someone calls and says, you know, I called 2 weeks ago about my road, we can pull it up and say, hey, they just, as a matter of fact, fixed it and are done with it. You should be able to go out there right now and it should be fine. They've got that taken care of.
So this is the purchase of new equipment?
Some of it's new equipment, and then some of it is just the I'm sure the radios, you know, our handheld radio system.
3022 is the line item
Right.
on one, and, you know, as I say, there's nothing in 20, nothing in 21, and 400,000 in 22. It's just,
So, right, so part of that is, one of the things he's requested is, and I think it was on this first page, because you asked about the radio, data usage charges for the field supervisors. That's in the.
That's for the program.
For the program for that, and for the radios and the tablets and all, yes.
which is new.
Which is
All
new.
new. And we're gonna have 400,000 a year from now on, or?
No, this was the purchase of the equipment, so we won't have, once we purchase
Okay.
it, we won't have to purchase it
Okay,
every year.
So it's just equipment purchase, or mainly?
Correct.
One other piece about that I got pretty excited about is that we'll do we used to look at our roads and we would use like a drone to kind of do a pan of the whole county and give us the feedback. We'll understand what our roads are, and then we can start looking at, okay, over the next 5 years, these are the roads based on what we saw at this snapshot point in time today, and you build out your 5-year plan based on some of that. Well, this will either reiterate what we've been talking about, meaning as we got vehicles running across the county and giving us real-time feedback and saying, you know what, this road has really got a lot more wear, a lot more tear, a lot more traffic on it, and we got it on the plan to upgrade that road in 2 years. Maybe we need to readjust and put it on in the coming year based on the feedback and real-time feedback. Because again, when you do your initial assessment of the roads, it is like accounting. It's a snapshot in time, and the world can change with a pandemic and you don't know, or what have you. So having this real time and having vehicles run across the county, whether it be pickup trucks and graders, it's always reading what's going on with that road. Potholes is good condition, light traffic, so we get all that and then upload it. We can kind of say, yeah, it's matching up with what we're looking to do over the next 5 years, or we need to modify what we plan on doing over the next few years. So that's some of the possibilities I see with the new programs, as well as what Brian just mentioned. Supervisors getting this information right off the bat as opposed to waiting a day to come back to the office, pick it up, and then try to respond. And many times, sometimes they even forget this is real time, so they can respond to those citizens across the county.
Any other discussion or questions? All right, we'll move forward.
Moving on to the veterans budget. Overall, they're down almost 8%, or at about $15,000 from last year. So just trying to find ways to provide services. They've been working really hard. Director Dykes has, with a lot of our partners, a lot of our corporate partners. I know that Judge Wood at the last quorum court meeting was talking about the groundbreaking and the 9/11 ceremony that we have planned for 9/11. And so we've got some partners coming out, J.B. Hunt, we have Tyson, working with Walmart. So we've got some of our big corporations that have always stepped in and helped us out. So they continue to help us. We continue to help them and their their vets that they need and to employ. And all in all, seems to be working out well for us.
Discussion or questions? Move forward.
So that'll bring us into the judge's other budgets. As you know, these are the ones that we don't really have a lot of control over. The first one is our ambulance service. I think that gone down. I think I see the chiefs back here. We good? You need to add anything? No, sir. Nope. Okay. We're good on that. We signed a new contract, and so that's kind of why that number's gone down a little bit. As the cities increase and the county decreases, it kind of changes our, we have a funding formula that we utilize, and so that's up there. The county health department has no change whatsoever. County health, they provide a lot of our services. They've done a lot of COVID screening and COVID vaccinations for us and provide a lot of different things, and so we take care of their building and provide them some funding to supplement that which the state provides to them as well. Our Csu Fund, we're not asking for any money right now, and this is I think this was out of our fund for our donations, our donation fund.
When it first got started.
When we first got started, so I don't think we've seen any change in that. We are still working to get a provider in. We should know something by the end of the week?
Tomorrow we got
Tomorrow, okay. So hopefully we'll have an update real soon about, what that is gonna look like, and we've got a lot of work, a lot of help from the governor's office on kind of pushing that forward, something that we can get up and running. If we don't see the results that we need to see, then we're gonna put it out for bid, and it's gonna be a long process, but it's just all we're gonna be able to do because we do wanna get that back up and running. So we have an option that'll drastically, eliminate a lot of the time that it will take to do that if we can get this option worked out. Otherwise, we'll have to go the long route, unfortunately. The district courts are in here. I don't have any explanation on the increases that they've requested, so I can't really speak to any of that. If need be, if you'd like, we can reach out to the court clerks and see if they can provide an explanation if anybody has any questions. The Extension Office is not asking for any more money this year. HIV clinic has actually decreased their budget just a little bit. That's something else that we get a lot of funding from the state to kind of pass through on that. The law library, it looks like Director Northam is asking for quite a big, or about $25,000. The law library is funded from a separate fund that we can't touch. We as the county don't get to touch. Because we have a law library, there's a certain portion of our fines and fees that go into that fund. Every time fines and fees are collected, we get our cut. The cities get their cut, the law library gets their cut, the circuit clerk gets its cut, county clerk gets her cut. So it's one of those things that we divide up. So, when they ask for money, they're just kind of a pass-through entity for us. There's not really much we can do other than appropriate the money so they can provide the services they want to. And then last is just the Interfund Transfers, which is what we always budget, about $950. That's for gel infusion and stuff like that, so that we have something in that fund budgeted. So I'll take any questions on any of that.
Wrap-up questions for Judge Wood, Chief of Staff Lester. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming tonight. I think it was very informative. I also want to thank you for being deliberate in your budget. When I sent out the letters earlier this year, I've always think it very unfair to say, we want you to cut 3% or we want you to do that. And all I asked all of our elected officials to do was to be very cognizant of the climate we're in. And I think you guys have done a very good job of that, but also I commend you on continuing to look to innovate in your departments to see how we can do better. So I really appreciate you coming tonight, and thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I have a couple comments to wrap up. I want to thank J.P. Duncan for jumping in last week and helping out covering the meeting for me. It helps out a lot when you've got a good team, and I want to thank the rest of the panel for having a good discussion with the sheriff and being welcoming and going through that budget. I do have a small update. It was discussed last week if we could move up the purchase of the automobiles to this year to possibly save some money, and I was working with the sheriff's department with that, but unfortunately GM has closed bids this year for new cars, so it will not come to fruition this year against all odds. Next meeting is our regular September meeting, and here's the process that I see that we're going to follow. We're going to start passing these budgets individually up to the full quorum court. I have asked, and you've received what I consider flat budgets in terms of vanilla budgets of what it takes to operate. I'm going to work with Comptroller Worthen. We have seen a whole host of additions and asks to those budgets, and we will vote on those separately too. All the additions will get an up or down vote to be included in the budget to then be passed on to the full quorum court. So, in that time, I challenge everyone to review where we've been and continue to reach out if you have questions and be prepared next meeting, because we're going to roll through all the budgets that has the propensity to be a very long meeting. And we're going to try to do that because I have promised that we want to get that budget up to full quorum court in October. With that, we'll move on to public comments. We have a 12-minute public comment period, 3-minute per person. Do we have any public comments this evening? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.